Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 114. We're joining you every week to talk IT career progression and bring you the advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers. I'm your host, Nick Cordy, filling in for my normal co-host, John White, at VJourneyman. We are both pre-sales technical engineers with backgrounds in IT operations. We hope our career discussions will be vendor neutral, relevant across disciplines, and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey to virtual enlightenment. So let's take a trip. Have you ever received a life-changing phone call? That's exactly what happened to Brad Christian at the conclusion of our last week's episode. So if you didn't listen to episode 113 that described Brad's early career experiences and how it taught him humility and got him to where he is today, definitely go back and give that a listen. This week, we're going to talk about what his career was like after getting to VMware. One of the most interesting things about part 2 of this interview is that Brad gives us some really great insight from a manager's lens about how we as individual contributors can contribute to our own progression, how we can help our managers promote us, how we can stay on top of our accomplishments, but also he gives us some inside baseball on what managers are really looking for during the hiring process. It was a good discussion, and I hope you enjoy it. So let's get to part 2, the interview with Brad Christian.
But I'm sorry, I digressed. So back to Sean Howard calling me after I got the VCDX. After I accepted the position, gladly, I found out, out of VMUG. I was actually outside. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm going to have to drop VMUG now, man. It's not ethical. I can't keep running it if I work at VMware. And I love doing VMUG. I'd done it for a long time. It'd just been a blast, and I had met so many cool people, like you, Nick, in the local area. But it was definitely worth it. And I felt like I had been drafted to go play for well, I'm not going to say the Dallas Cowboys because that would just be sad, but definitely for a pro sports team. I felt like I stepped up to the big leagues finally, after paying my dues. And boy, did I learn a lot. I mean, it was a fun journey, especially starting out in the networking and security business unit, doing all that with such a new product that was so different and new. I learned a ton.
Now, did you have the same thing that I had, which was, wow, this was my dream job, and here I am on day one. I actually need to start working on a new dream. I can't stop here, right?
Yeah. Well, so I had climbed that mountain, and so you kind of rest at the top and you pant for a while, and catch your breath. When I actually went to work for a manufacturer, and it's not for everybody, by the way. If you're listening to this and you're still in your early 20s, working your way up, working in a call center, don't feel like to get to the pinnacle of, the art of being, an IT person is going to work for a manufacturer. It's not for everybody. It's definitely not. First off, you have to enjoy people. You have to enjoy interacting with people. For me, when I finally understood that I was good at this and that I like being in sales, was you go into a room, there's a bunch of strangers, and you whiteboard for an hour. You either get energy out of that or it takes energy away. If it takes energy away, you shouldn't be there. You should walk out. It's not always going to go great, of course. Everybody has a bad day. But there should be these days that just stand out, that are golden, where you walked in, you're hitting on all cylinders, and you solved their problems, and they're looking at you like, oh man, where were you 6 months ago? Oh, we've needed the answers that you have. And that feeling of being able to do that is just great. So if you can do that, if you enjoy that part of this game, then do it. But don't feel like you have to. There's lots of other paths forward, to more money. I mean, because at the end of the day, we're just taking care of our kids and our wives, right? Or husbands. So, there's a lot of different paths you can go. Eventually, I went into leadership, which if you had asked me 10 years ago if I was going to be a manager, I would have laughed. Right? But way back in the Dallas County days, I had started getting leadership training. So I went through the civil service leadership training and started to understand that you can accomplish more if you have a team of people out there working on your goals for you. It increases the width of your scope and how much you can accomplish if you get a team together and start driving them forward and building a high performance team. Now at the county, what's the biggest problem they had? It was actually people who quit and stayed. If you've ever been at a DMV, you'll know what I mean, right? They're just there for the paycheck. They right? That happens a lot. But in IT and especially at this level, the team I have now, they are all consummate professionals, and they're awesome. I learn from them all the time, and they help me work a much larger patch than I could work on my own. And the one thing I've learned coming into leadership here is that I'm a servant. And at this level of play, if you come in and think that you're going to be the big man and be rude to people and push people around and stuff, you will not last long. I don't care what company it is. Nobody's going to put up with that. So I'm here to serve the folks on my team to help them do their job better and get impediments out of the way. And if you can do that and enjoy it and still manage to hold on to your technical ability a little bit, just a little bit, you get a lot done, and it's a lot of fun. And the fact is, I'm also getting up there in years. I got to have a retirement plan at some point, and going into leadership as well, because I can't read and stay up till 2 a.m. like I used to. I'm just too tired.
That's too funny. How do you think, or maybe it is, or it does, or it doesn't, but the effectiveness of having gone through the VCDX process, that kind of training kind of trains you to be kind of on the knife edge of the individual contributor track, right? Not on the leadership track. So in that process, do you think that there were some crossover skills that you gained, either from, studying the technology, studying period, making connections, working with people? Any lessons learned there?
Yeah, quite a few. So back to enterprise architecture. I don't think I can state it enough. Understanding how all this tech helps a business is key. Right now, what I still have to learn things all the time. Right now, I'm really trying to understand at a deep level how software as a service, how it affects bookings. If I understand that, I work better with my sales counterpart. It's actually really hard. So when you're paying for a perpetual license, right? It's money up front. The customer pays for it. And you get 3 years of support. That's fairly easy math to do and reconcile the books and make the bookkeepers happy. Well, when you're doing it on a monthly payment plan, right, which is what a lot of cloud services are, and you're doing subscriptions, understanding the impact on everybody it's way more difficult. It's extremely more difficult than I thought it would be, and I'm good at math, So learning you're still going to keep learning technical things, but the enterprise architecture piece of it, going through that, it hammered it into my head that there had to be a justification for everything, eventually, to the business. That's what the VCDX program really drove home, and it intellectually, but to go through that process and stand tall, before that, those people attacking your design, and all the practice that I had to go through to be good at it and not get too nervous. It really helped me understand that it all comes back to the business. It also the people part of it, going through the VCDX process. I couldn't have done it without all the people, that helped with my design or attacked it, found weaknesses. And that was years of meeting people and making contacts and making some good friends. All that stuff came into it, but ultimately it was humility, the humility to take advice to, oh, maybe that decision was bad. Maybe I didn't know what I was doing. Once you have that humility, it directly translates to leadership, because, when you're working with a team of smart folks, I don't know all the answers, but boy, my folks sure do. And if they don't, we got people we can call. I don't know. I probably didn't answer your question. I went off track there, but
No, I think you did answer it. There's a lot to learn that goes into being an effective manager, and one of those things, at least if I say this back to you, is the idea, giving up on the idea that you're going to be the best at everything. Just because you're the manager doesn't mean that you're the smartest at all the things that the team does, right? In fact, that's probably a detriment. Yeah, got it. And then all of the people interactions that you had, studying, learning, pushing, having people attack your technical designs without taking that personally, and being able to keep your cool and composure under that kind of pressure probably helped as well.
You put it so much better than I do.
But that's what John does.
That's it. Yeah.
No, that's just sales engineering, right? Here's what I heard you say.
My worst boss was a guy I really liked. Right? There's just lots of different bosses you have. When you become a manager, when you become a boss, it's not like you think it is. When you're a high performer and you're doing something highly technical like we do, you think that you're being watched more than you really are. Managers watch where the problem spots are. The squeaky wheel gets the kick. The people who are performing well and doing great don't get as much as attention as they deserve. So an important skill to learn is managing your manager. When people want pay raises or promotions, you can't just leave it up to your boss to go get that for you, because it's never your boss directly giving it to you, right? He's got to go above him, right? And justify things like that. So you have to help him realize your worth, at least over on the sales side. Being able to draw attention to what you're doing and showing the impact you're making is part of it. If you don't sell yourself, nobody else will. And that includes getting the next job. So take advantage of the networks that you've built. Make sure people know what you're doing. Make sure your LinkedIn has every cool thing you've done. Get it out there. If you don't cheerlead for yourself, nobody else is going to do it. That's another huge thing I've learned. One of the struggles I have as a leader is getting some of these people to do that. They don't want to do it. It feels like an unnatural act. They're like, no. I don't want to call attention to myself like that. I hear that all the time, and it's like, no, you. In fact, I tell my guys, make a folder in Dropbox or whatever it is you use to store your files. Call it "I Love Me," and every time you get an email complimenting you, save the PDF. Save all of that everywhere you work, all that great stuff, and keep it so you can remember what you need to have on there that you actually did successfully, because you're going to forget, right? So save that stuff and keep it, and use that to help your manager help you. And also managers have to manage up too. We have directors, and there's a whole chain. And I've been super lucky. Just about everybody I've worked with has been awesome. Especially VMware, because it's got a pretty unique culture. Just lots of nice people. So don't forget that piece either. Be nice.
One of the things that I always think about, a performance management process and letting your, management chain know what it is that you're doing. The problems with that I see is always that it's more work, and people don't want to do more work, right? So documenting what it is that you've done and the impact that you've had is work that a lot of people don't understand how to do. And so, again, it's one of those things. It's like, well, I don't want to be bad at it, so
Yeah.
I just won't start it, and then there's no chance that I'll be bad at it, which is a constant theme for us.
I highly recommend, if you haven't read it, go memorize it right now. Getting Things Done by David Allen. I wouldn't be where I'm at now without that methodology. If you have to wait, like you're applying for a job and you're trying to update your resume, it is like moving a mountain. It is so stressful and painful if you haven't touched your resume in 2 or 3 years to update it to go apply for that new job. You have no idea what to put. It's hard. So follow a Getting Things Done system, and as part of that, when you accomplish something, update your resume. Do it now. Don't wait, because then it becomes just this huge stressful thing to do. And I think it's half the reason people don't leave a role they should be leaving to go to the next better thing, because it just seems like such a monumental task to write all that down and go through the process and go through the interviews, because you haven't been preparing all along. So always be writing stuff down like that as you accomplish something. You get a new certification, get on LinkedIn, get that in there immediately. You solve a huge problem or deploy a data center, or who knows what it is. Write it down when you do it and make it part of your Getting Things Done methodology. Have in the Getting Things Done system, I personally use Evernote, and have a folder in there where you're saving notes about cool projects or things you've accomplished, and make it part of your every Friday when you're going through and cleaning all your stuff up for the week. Note that stuff that you accomplished that was cool. Take screenshots, whatever. Save that stuff, and then updating your resume isn't nearly as hard.
Right. You can cull through all the weekly updates you did for yourself and pick the ones that highlight the most for this next job you're after. I love it. It's just hard to get started doing it.
And if you're not planning right now for what your next job is, you're nuts. I've worked at VMware now for I'm in my 6th year, and I'll probably stay here. I love the culture. It's very unique. But who knows? We could get hit by an asteroid. There's just no telling what could happen in the future. I've heard some great advice. You can't rely on a company, because we live in a very fast-paced, changing, world of IT, and you can't necessarily rely on. You're not going to get a watch in 20 years, right? I mean, that doesn't happen anymore. I saw that happen with my dad. He actually worked for Kodak, 25 years, straight out of the Navy.
Yeah, my dad worked for Eastman Kodak
as
well.
Sold copiers, these copiers that were huge. I mean, they were the size of a car. And he worked there, 25 years, and he got laid off right as Kodak started to implode, and it devastated him. I mean, he loved that company. He didn't have a plan for what happened next. Now, he was fine a couple of months later, but it was hugely painful to not have a plan. To move to next as that happened. So always have an exit strategy. Know what the next rung of the ladder is going to be. Don't think it needs to be manager either. Managers have to do things like fire people. Firing somebody is an incredibly hard thing to do. Going through that performance process and having to deal with that. It's not everybody's meant to have that. So don't think that the next step of your journey has to be manager. There's lots of other different roles out there. Project manager. Some of the smartest folks in IT I've ever known were PMs. So look at other roles within the industry, and just never forget, it's not the companies that are going to give you a safety net. It's your relationships. It's the people that you get to know over time. Like that asteroid hits VMware in Palo Alto, and boom, the whole thing blows up. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to call John White. Help, John. Something like that. So just keep all that in mind, and just keep planning, and you'll get
And
there.
just like you mentioned, documenting your work weekly, you have to keep that network warm and put work into that every so often on a cadence. Especially as your network grows, you have to. I think, John, you said this before. Keep the network hot and don't make every interaction be you asking the person for something, because you don't want to be that guy.
That was me directly quoting, I think it was Manager Tools or Career Tools. You want to constantly be asking your network what it is that you can be doing for them. And, it's like making a series of small deposits, because at some point in time, you're going to have to make a withdrawal and say, hey, I need some help. And you just don't know where that's going to come from, right?
So, and don't even try to keep track. Constantly be paying things forward. All this stuff I did, and the point where I'm at in my career, came because I held up my hand at that VMUG and volunteered, and it was a ton of work. I worked my butt off to arrange venues and get money from VARs and manufacturers to pay for, food and, a venue and all this stuff, and still make it interesting. It was an absolute ton of work. It was the best thing I ever did for my career. And it was pure volunteerism. I wouldn't be anywhere close to where I'm at now if I had not volunteered to do that. So find ways you can directly give back. Make it through charity. It doesn't matter. Just get out there and do stuff that doesn't really benefit you directly, and pay stuff forward. And I'm convinced good things will come to you.
Make sure you put all those things on your resume that you're doing to pay it forward, because that's something that you can use for relatable experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is all super great advice. I'm loving every minute of this.
Oh, thanks. Oh, in-person training. That's the number one complaint I have about COVID. The best thing you can do as a consultant or as an individual contributor at a company, when COVID's over and you finally get the chance to go to in-person training, do all of it you can. It helps with the networking, but when I look back at times when I got like a power up, in life's video game, it was at a week-long training course, or I flew somewhere and I did that. Listening to people talk is just always better than the NSX Ninja program. I went through that in 2015. And that was 3 weeks, not in a row, but it was 3 weeks spread out. Networking finally clicked for me in my head, at that point. I knew a lot and I had done a lot, but really, really getting it was hearing some of the best in the world, go in there and teach. So, as soon as, everybody gets inoculated, get out there and go to those training classes, get out behind those Zoom sessions. So when the opportunity comes, get out there.
I'm curious, how do you find the right type of talent for your team?
I'm glad you asked that. It's not easy, first off. It is way harder than I thought it was going to be. As I got into this, I mean, I had been a leader before, but I didn't really have control over who got hired. That almost always happened through HR, some level higher than me. I'd always be the technical interviewer, but the final person making the decision, it was a long time before, I was the one doing that. When I got to that point, wow, it was way harder than I thought it was going to be. The number one thing I've learned is, if they don't know the tech, I don't really care. We have some of the greatest training in the world. We have VMware hands-on labs. They can, if they understand the fundamentals behind it, or they have experience as a customer working in this space and how, it give them the right kind of stories. A lot of times that's more important. I love that word verisimilitude that I mentioned before. It's because it has shades that they're telling the truth, right? So in this kind of role, having those interesting stories in your background so that you can put forward a narrative is almost more important than a lot of technical expertise in the type of SE role that they're going for. So far I've managed networking and security, but also HCI, right? vSAN, VCF, Nick, which you're familiar with, that have managed all those types of SEs. And almost always, as soon as you get hired into the role, you're going to go through an insane amount of training. And you have all these labs you can follow. And I'm sure it's the same at Google, John, or anywhere else. There is awesome training courses and all the stuff you can learn. There are things that can't be taught. People skills, getting along with others, being one of the best tests I've heard is, would you want to be with somebody in a car for 3 hours driving somewhere to meet with a customer? That's one of the most important ones. And then, of course, the diversity and inclusion thing is hard as well. The one thing I've learned is it's hard to find female engineers. It can be very difficult. The questions you need to ask and the process you go through has to be different. It's very different. Guys will lie and exaggerate their skill at things, or they're like, "Oh yeah, I'll lie about it. I'll fake it till I make it." The ladies, won't necessarily do that. They'll see, those 20 bullet points, that the job role has, and that was, by the way, made by HR, not the hiring manager. And they'll see one line on there that, "Oh, I don't know how to do that. Oh, I'm not qualified." And it's like, no, go for it. Try, get in there and throw your hat in the ring. So the diversity and inclusion part is difficult. There's a large emphasis on it in the industry, because it is kind of turned. There is way too many dudes, first off, but the fact is, you kind of got to be a nerd to like this stuff. And there's way more nerdy dudes than ladies. But so those parts are difficult.
There's a cultural bias against, women being nerds. I think until very recently, like, it's become a lot more acceptable. That's through culture. It's your Big Bang theories. It's the fact that, being a nerd is where the paycheck is at right now. And there's nothing more in fashion than the paycheck, right? So it doesn't matter. It could be sales, it could be whatever, right? If people find that socially acceptable.
And you got to dig sometimes for the nerd. So when I'm interviewing, I'm actually looking for that kind of thing. Like, what do you nerd out about? If you get me started talking about science fiction and fantasy, I go on for days. I don't watch TV. I hardly ever watch any video stuff. I read books, 3 or 4 a week. My kids hate it. But I'm constantly reading. The whole reason I may seem to be remotely intelligent is just I've read so much science fiction that just stuff kind of sticks, about the science end of it. But I think we all have nooks and crannies in our lives that are like that. And if you dig for it in the interview process to find out what people are passionate about, it's a great way to get in there and get them to open up and talk about and get through their nervousness and start talking about, why they're a good fit for the role and why you would want to sit with them for 3 hours in a car.
I like the way you said that. You want to help the person talking to you in the interview get over their nervousness. You're not there to slap them around and make them feel bad if they're not qualified. You just want to hear about who they are as a person. And I'm assuming even if they don't get it, you want to be able to give them some positive feedback so that they can take that forward and improve.
Yeah, and a good manager will actually stay in touch with people that maybe, they got through the HR folks and they got to the interview process and maybe they were not a fit for that particular role. I've had people that I called 6 months later and hired. Right? So the little things like sending a thank you note, or, at the very least, even if you don't get a job, connect on LinkedIn with that hiring manager, because just because you didn't get the role doesn't mean, that he, didn't like you or something like that. It just may have been there was different needs for that position. At VMware, it's not like maybe out in the public sector or something like that, where maybe you interview with a couple of technical folks, and then you talk to the hiring manager, and he'll go, "Oh, you're hired," and he stomps out a cigar. That's not what we do at VMware. We have panels, so we have panel interviews, and I think most companies are moving to that. Where sure you'll talk with the first HR, the hiring person, and then you'll talk to the manager, and the manager is really there. I'm trying to sell them on the job. I want them to, hey, here's my team. I'm looking for more people for this awesome team. Here's why you would want to have this job. And then, we go through a panel process, where we have a diverse slate of candidates and a diverse slate of interviewers. And it's not that different than a VCDX. Maybe you don't have a designer defending, but you are going to go up there and whiteboard. I feel sorry for everybody having to apply for jobs right now. It's the worst. It's much better in person. I'd much prefer that. But going through that kind of interview process where you're asked questions and you have a chance to show that you can think quick on your feet, that's great. And I always tell them, present on something besides the technology of the job you're applying for. I don't care. I've hired a guy because of how he described ham radio repeaters and how they worked in the Arizona desert. Right? Because he took a technically difficult subject, broke it down, and I learned something. So, there's lots of different ways you can get a technical job. Bring your passions with you.
That's great advice. How do you mitigate against I would say my general assumption about a hiring manager is that they are allergic to risk, right? So it's easier to make a safe hire in my mind than it is to make a risky hire. And a risky hire is like the person who doesn't have the experience over the person who does.
Right.
So what is the mental process that you go through there?
So a lot of it is tied to the segment that you work. So for those of you who, have never been in sales, there's not just one monolithic sales team, right? There's different segments. So some do large enterprises, some do state, local education, some do federal. All of those have unique challenges. And I happen to specialize in commercial. So commercial is the mid-market. They're the little guy. To me, there is, if apply for commercial role as your first one, because you'll get somebody like me interviewing you, and maybe you are new, and maybe I'm taking a chance, and maybe you're a customer at this point of, and you want to make the jump to come over here. Well, if you already have all the technical skills because you've been doing them in your day job, and I talk to you, and man, you've got the scar tissue, right? You've been in the trenches, and you've gotten that call at 1 a.m. that the data center's down, and you've been doing this a long time. The fact is, it may take a while to train you up to standards, but it takes everybody a while to get trained up to standards. As long as you've got the social skills and and you're just a nice person, I'll take that chance over somebody perhaps who's been doing it for 20 years, has seen everything, done everything. Oh, I've worked some of the biggest deals, and gosh, they're not much fun to talk to, though. So there are different roles out there. So, don't think that you see one role and you apply for it and you don't get it. Don't be dismayed by that. Get out there and try other segments, other companies, right? There's lots of smaller companies where you can get your start. Don't be afraid to go work for a VAR. The best thing I did was go work for a VAR, for Sigma Solutions. I worked for a guy named Bob Sargent. Learned a ton from that guy about managing, about how this business works, about mitigating risk, right? Because at the end of the day, the real risk in all this is a customer outage, right? That's the actual risk. So how do you make sure that doesn't happen? And managing a group of people, out on the road for 4 or 5 days at a time, people drinking too much, that could be an issue. Like I had to save a consultant who got so drunk he fell down and broke his arm at an A-loft because I got those concrete floors. Dealing with that kind of thing, that can be tough. But get out there and work at all different sizes of companies. If you're working for state and local government, go work as a consultant for a while. It won't kill you. If you can tolerate the travel, a lot of it has to do with the age of children and that kind of stuff. But if you're trying to get started, there's lots of ways to do it. Don't go on a website for a company and you see the one job role in your city and you go for it and they don't even call you back and you give up. That I think is absolutely ridiculous. I can never find people to hire. It's so hard to find people to hire. So from the other side of that, I have a hard time finding folks. It's not easy to find somebody to come over and do that job because not enough people will apply. I think a lot of people self-select themselves out of the process because of a lack of confidence. The latest person I hired, he's an expert at building all these vSAN robo clusters on like Mac Minis and doing all this cool stuff, and he's heavily involved in VMUG. All that stuff. He was not directly an expert at NSX. He was an expert at most of VMware's products, but he was not an NSX, ninja or anything. But was I willing to take a chance with him? Yes, because I liked him. He had that intellectual curiosity, and he had every other piece. Customers like him. I mean, that's part of it too.
No, I think it's a big part of why people are listening is getting a perspective from a hiring manager on that kind of thing is not something that we often get to inquire about. So really appreciate
don't send
that.
more than a 1 page on a resume. Nobody reads that crap.
1 page only.
Trim it down.
Seriously, when I have to look at dozens of them, I look at the name. I look at if there's a tagline, if they said what they are. Then if they had that little mission statement thing, sometimes I'll read that. Then I go directly down to the work experience and I look to make sure they're not a job hopper. So what are the dates and how long did they stay at each place? If I see 6 months, 6 months, 6 months, 6 months, he better have been a contractor, and be able to prove it and all that kind of stuff. Because nobody wants somebody who's hopping around all the time, and looking at some of the companies, and then I'll glance down at the certifications in the college maybe, but you have to go through so many of them when you're going through the process. I mean, it's not like you spend more than a little bit of time. And don't forget, the HR people at companies do a lot of filtering ahead of time before it even gets to the hiring manager. All you're doing is trying to get through a keyword search. So 1 page, keep it short and snappy. Here's what you are. Here's how you stand out. Send a PDF with cool fonts. Do something to make it stand out. That's the kind of thing that's going to help you more. But, more than anything else, if you do get on the phone, show enthusiasm. It's amazing how many people forget to do that. Show that you are actually enthusiastic about the job because the hiring manager is a human and he doesn't want you, he wants you to be stoked to come work, right? So bring that.
I'm assuming, Brad, that you want people to ask you questions about the job to show that they're interested. You want them to ask you something about the environment. Not everybody seems to bring questions to those discussions.
That's huge. So if you show that you're worried about the culture, that means you're a fit in a lot of ways. Because the one thing I love about this company is they're just some genuinely nice people. When I heard Pat Gelsinger was leaving VMware, I was like, whatever, CEO. I have no idea what his day-to-day was or what he did, but he was a genuinely nice guy. I mean, when you'd bump into him in person, he always took the time to talk to just about anybody. As a VMUG leader, he was super cool. So I was sad to see him go because of that, just because he was a nice person and a cool guy with a cool story. I wish him all the luck, in the new role. So show that you're concerned about the culture. Ask questions about that. Ask questions about who your teammates are going to be. One of the hardest things for a leader right now is how do I build a high-performing team when nobody ever gets to go together for like an on-site or something. I mean, I'm managing a team of people, most of whom have never met each other. Think about that for a minute. And I'm expecting them to be a cohesive team, right? Or like the A team, right? And you're trying to build, that kind of camaraderie and friendship, and you fill in for each other, and you're trying to build that. But everybody lives really far apart, and with COVID and everything, they can't really meet. That's hard. So show that you're interested in the team and that you're a team player. There's a reason why a lot of, especially at sales leader side, they love to hear that somebody's ex-military or ex-sports. Don't hesitate, even if it was just high school football or something. Bring that kind of thing up.
That's a good point.
Brad, you're just dropping nuggets of gold on us. It's I think we could keep on pulling this out of you for hours and hours, but I feel bad that we've kept you here this long. Anything else? I think we're probably wrapping up for time here, but anything else that you can think of maybe that we didn't cover that we should have?
No, I think we hit all of it, but just don't be afraid to dream big. And what am I going to do in the next 20 years? I want to retire at some point, right? I'm going to go back and teach, I think. I want to go back and get my PhD in history. So, I've got a plan for what I'm going to do, as I gradually step out of this rat race, right? I will sooner or later. So what am I going to do in my 60s and 70s? I'd love to be that cool history professor guy maybe you had in high school. That sounds like a blast. Really, I enjoyed the teaching. So that's what all this is. I found out that in that book Mastery that I mentioned before by Robert Greene, it's hard to figure out what your life's task is, what your life's work is going to be. And it took me a long time to figure out that for my life's work, I like to teach. It's why I'm a good SE. I really enjoy helping maybe somebody at a lower skill level and younger in their career. If I can help that person up level and make more money so that they can take care of their family, and they get to the point where money doesn't matter as much, that they're having a blast, aim for that. Figure out what your life's task is. What is it about this IT world that you actually like? Well, for me, it's teaching. I love working with younger folks, and it's part of the reason I went into leadership. I like working and mentoring with people and helping them get there. That won't be the same for any of y'all listening to this. It'll be something else, but whatever that thing is, figure out what it is and aim for what are the next steps going to be for you to get there. Find systems, networks to get you in place to get to where you need to go, and work on a long-term plan. Don't be the guy who spends 25 years with hearing protection on in a colo, doing break fix. Nobody deserves to be that guy. So find out what your life's task is, within this, and don't be afraid to go for the hard stuff. I didn't think I'd ever get the VCDX, but I went for it. It sure wasn't easy, but it got me to where I wanted to go. So just don't be afraid to go out there and listen to podcasts like this, network, go to VMUGs or other user groups, and just rely on the people around you, and you'll get there.
Great advice.
Brad, thank you. Yeah, that is great advice. Thanks so much for your time and for joining us here on Nerd Journey.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Anytime someone levels up like this to manager, there's this mindset change that has to happen because you're no longer an individual contributor like you were before. And I liked what Brad said about having his accomplishments really be the accomplishments of the team itself, and that they can accomplish more together than he could by himself. And it's not that we don't believe in accomplishing a goal as being part of a team, but I think it's different when you manage a team. I've never managed a team, but that's the perspective I have from interviewing several people who are managers now. I guess I didn't realize how much men exaggerate and lie about their accomplishments. So guys, stop doing that and giving us a bad name. And whoever you are, if you're listening out there, don't think that you have to meet every requirement in a job description in order to send that application in there. Have somebody help you write it, help you highlight the things that the company is looking for so you can make it past the HR screen, to Brad's point. And I also liked what he said about selling the person he's talking to in an interview about taking the job, because he actually struggles to find good talent. Maybe that's a common thing among managers these days in every area. So we want to make sure that if we're on an interview, that we're excited to be there, excited about working for the company. Hopefully you can say that. I know in some cases we have to take jobs to feed our families and take care of business, but hopefully you get the chance to apply for something that you're really excited about. And don't give up. After doing this interview with Brad, I picked up the book Mastery on Audible. It's actually quite fascinating. I'm not finished with it yet, but this idea of finding your life's task is something I had not heard of. It seemed similar to what we talked about with the area of destiny, but somewhat different. And it's not an easy thing to do. I don't think I've found mine yet because I just learned what the concept is, but maybe I can report back on lessons learned from reading that book. I think we oftentimes learn very well in stories, and hearing the stories of people in history and what they did and how they achieved mastery in their specific area through the various experiences is extremely interesting and helpful. Just a reminder that we want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter @NerdJourney. Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm Nick Cordy @NetworkNerd_ for my buddy John White @VJourneyman, signing off.